What if you are born with cerebral palsy and maybe, say, oh, but I'll take care of them. I'll get them the fancy wheelchair and I'll get them everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter because they might want to live, which is fine, but that's like me playing Russian roulette, putting it to your head and going click. And then if it doesn't go, I say, see, look, it's fine.
Got a woman pregnant by accident, let's say.
Yeah.
What would be your first thing to do?
Well, presumably, I mean, I'm not into having one night stands, so presumably she would know my views ahead of time because I'll presumably have some past relationship with her.
I would wear a
So, yeah, I have a vasectomy, so this is not going to happen to me. But I would, if I didn't have a vasectomy, I would reiterate my views to her, and I would say, look, at the end of the day, you're going to make a decision you're going to make. But you know how I stand. If you do have the kid, I also took the risk along with you, so I'll look after the kid. But that's all you can do.
You also got to
What do you base your is there like a philosophical basis on which you base your argument that having children is wrong?
Probably just life is painful.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
really.
you're birthing people into
Does that mean that
capitalism
you're
and
like a utilitarian or
climate
like
crisis.
utilitarian or what?
I would say
About
You
hedonism.
cannot.
It's-
Hedonism is like it's a philosophical.
I'm gonna quote my lyrics again because I wrote a song about this called "The Chain of No Choice," and it literally I'm saying that you cannot speak for a child by saying that I'm gonna give them a good life. Well, your idea of a good life might not be the same as that child. Even if you're rich, even if you've got all the food and all the health, the health insurance, whatever you might need, and the kid goes to school. What if you're born in, say, South Africa and you're gay? You might get bullied, you might get killed. What if you are born with cerebral palsy and maybe, say, oh, but I'll take care of them. I'll get them the fancy wheelchair and I'll get them everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter because they might want to live, which is fine, but that's like me playing Russian roulette, putting it to your head and going click. And then if it doesn't go, I say, see, look, it's fine.
Why is
But why would you take...
preferable?
well, because if someone
If
doesn't,
you don't exist, how can you have an opinion?
there's no suffering.
Okay,
There's no need to come
Oh
into
wait,
existence.
okay.
So
So
why is suffering assumed to be
Bad?
automatically negative?
Well,
because
once,
it doesn't have to be, but it's the overwhelming sense.
I don't
of what
think
this has
harm
become.
is bad, but I think suffering is bad because to me, suffering is different from harm. Like everybody has to go through pain, Like pain is fine. Pain teaches you, but suffering is when it's unnecessary and consistent, And life is unnecessary, consistent pain for a lot of people that don't deserve it for reasons that aren't there. So to me,
There's lots of different sources of suffering and pain, though. Surely we should. I mean,
if
obviously
we had a
all
better
have-
society, even if we had a really, really good, like say, borderline utopian society, why are you gambling with babies? Why are you gambling with the idea that that kid might come out with no leg and it might ruin their life? And then to kill yourself is so much harder than to not be born. So if a kid grows up suicidal,
Yeah.
you can't control that. You can't control their feelings and their opinions. How much harder is it to kill yourself than to not be born? If you've ever tried to kill yourself, you'll know it's hard.
But have you read Brave New World?
Oh yeah.
So Brave New World is like a good example of what it might look like to not have to suffer, right? Because they're basically constantly.
well, so
Would that be preferable to a world where we have to suffer, but that suffering can be transformative and can help other people, or can be something that can make us into more loving, compassionate people? Surely
I
that's
think
better,
that
not
is a
suffer.
conversation to be
However-
had when we do something about the society first.
You're also counting on the fact that every single individual that will go through that thing gets turned into that person, because they don't.
But
You
isn't
get
it up
some
to
people
us?
who go through suffering and start killing other people.
But isn't it kind of up to us to use our agency to use that suffering to be better?
And how good are we doing that?
Well,
not very well.
We're not doing very well at it. I mean,
No.
some of us are.
If you argue, okay, it's one thing to choose not to have children.
And when throughout
personally,
history
it's a
have
personal
we
choice.
done well with that?
It's one thing to choose
I think it's
personally not to have.
immoral to have children.
Right, but it's another thing to then say from that you would rather not take the chance of bringing someone into this world knowing that there's a high chance that they may suffer unnecessarily than to then say that you should deny all possible children the opportunity to live because
But
you're
they-
assuming
but
that
they
They don't
exist.
exist. There's no deprivation.
There's no
Like
deprivation of
before
somebody
you were
that isn't
born,
here.
you didn't exist as a ghost fetus wanting to come into existence. You were just created, right?
I don't know about you guys, but I was floating as a little cloud up somewhere, and then my
And I
mom
was
just
like,
brought
man, I
me
really hope
down.
somebody will birth me, you know?
I was like, please.
No, I don't believe in like kind of like a separate kind of entity of like
Yeah,
a soul.
yeah.
I think
I
animals
believe
don't
that-
know
I
any
do
better, but
believe
humans
that
do, and that's why we should stop.
You can't. It's like I think it's a jump. There's a gap that I don't feel your friend has explained or I haven't heard yet. That from life being inherently painful and that there is suffering inherent in life, and that therefore you should be responsible about whether or not you should bring another person into
Yeah.
this world. It's a jump to then say that therefore no one should have any more children. There's a gap that I don't understand.
I mean, personally, I'm against living things in general. I think that life was a really bad chemical accident that got a little bit out of hand when it came to self-awareness. And I think that self-awareness has caused people to need purpose. The only problem is we don't have purpose. You know, everybody's looking to God or capitalism or politics or some sort of something. People need to come up with a reason why they're living. When in reality, the only reason you're living is whatever reason you decide that you're living. And to me, that's totally fine. You do what you do. But the problem is, I'm actually a complete nihilist. I think living things should not exist. Like, I love cats, I love animals. However, they don't know any better. We do. Personally, I think everything down to a single-celled organism should fizzle out. I don't think sentience is necessary in the universe. I think it's a bad thing. And I think what we do is we cherry pick reality because we have such a strong survival instinct, you know, that we'll do anything to live, even if there's no reason for it. You'll see people getting tortured in a dungeon, and they definitely are not getting out. And they're on their last, you know, your last dying day, you know, when you're starving. I was just listening to this documentary about a shipwreck where these guys were on their, they had 48 hours left to live, according to the doctors, when they were rescued. And they were like, why didn't you just let us die? And even still, if you gave them food, they'd eat it.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is like, it's not a rational decision to live.
Yeah.
Like,
Driven into
to me,
us by evolution.
think
Yeah.
that kind of suffering.
living should be an option. It should be a choice. You should want to live, not feel like you have to.
How can
And to
you
me,
choose them?
exactly, I don't think you can have that
Oh,
choice.
wait,
Can't.
no. That,
Point.
that is the jump that you're missing. It's the fact that there is no choice.
There is no choice in living.
Because
The suffering
Even
in
once
life
you-
is
once you're
imposed on a
alive-
new person without their consent.
all right, okay, so
Once you're alive, it's hard to just say, I don't want to live. You know, like, it's not that easy.
But what suffering are you talking about? You're talking about what kind of suffering?
Any form,
Hunger,
from
abuse,
torture to
financial
minor inconvenience,
deprivation.
any negative thing in life will be imposed on that new
The fact that
person.
you have to eat animals to survive.
You're making an assumption that suffering
Yes.
is inherently bad.
Yes.
No, actually,
I can explain
I think that's an assumption.
Yeah.
And it is also, and then that assumption, even if that assumption is correct, then saying that therefore it's the net benefit to these unborn, non-existent, hypothetical people is better that they don't exist is another jump. So there's
Yeah.
one jump, which is there's suffering and suffering is bad and there's an immense amount of suffering. There's a jump to say that suffering is inherently bad, and then another jump, which is therefore we should not have children.
Yeah.
And I don't
So,
see any connection between
I,
those.
I can explain. So I think once we exist, I think suffering is inherently bad, but it can have instrumental value. And I think often people think suffering can be good, but they're confusing the instrumental value with the actual suffering itself. So let's say someone is sexually abused. Horrible. I don't think anyone's going to say that's good. But in the long run, it could lead them to grow from that. They could start a charity to help other people who have survived sexual abuse. So someone could make the argument and say they've grown from that. It doesn't mean the suffering itself was good. It means that there was instrumental value, right? And that can happen. That's just one case, but this can happen with all forms of suffering.
This person's jacket says we're all doomed. I love that. On the back. You know, this punk over there or something. She's just got it on the back. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
But it can also be something as trivial as going to the gym, right? We voluntarily elect to take on suffering, knowing that there can be some greater form of growth from that, right? But there's a difference between voluntarily electing to take on suffering and imposing it on someone else, and also having instrumental value from that suffering, and there being no value to a non-existent person to gain instrumental value. So it could make sense to us to say, if you have been sexually abused, it's good to try and use it as a learning mechanism,
Yeah.
as well as getting over it. But it wouldn't make sense to say, I'm going to have a kid so that if there's...
You need to take into consideration that people are different and people have different opinions. Some people want to live, some people don't want to live. Some people want to live but wish they didn't get born.
Yeah.
Some people wish they weren't born but want to live. The point being is, it's not your right to push it on someone else who hasn't existed yet, make them exist, and make them have to make that decision. Because if they have a really negative one, such as, I want to kill myself, you've put them in that position. And it doesn't matter if sometimes, yes, you have, because you caused them to exist. And if this flag is getting on
You
my
were the
nerves.
person that made that
You're the
decision
person-
for the child to be born. Therefore,
Anything that happens to them is your fault.
So
Yes.
hypothetically,
Yes.
if you want to kill yourself,
Yeah,
is it your parents' fault?
Yes,
Ultimately, they were the one who
Bad
put...
decisions.
it doesn't matter.
Well, but they
hang
were
on,
the one who
hang on,
made
hang
those
on,
bad
hang-
decisions
hang on,
if
hang
you
on,
hadn't
hang
been
on.
born.
Hang on. Also, just
You have a responsibility to make decent decisions for yourself.
Hang on.
If you're,
But
you have
just
a
as you said yourself, it's also your parents' responsibility to limit your ability to make bad decisions and to keep you safe.
And lots of parents
So,
If your kid is a serial killer, are you responsible?
yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's everyone's parents' fault. Everyone who wants to kill themselves or would rather not be living that is.
but their
automatically
parents
their
are the ones that birthed them, which
Yeah, they were the ones that put
which
them in
then
that situation in
resulted
the first place. Like, the parents knew they were bringing them into a world where one of the outcomes was they could want to kill themselves, and they willingly did. I know,
Everybody who
but
has
there's the risk, right? So if I sign on the dotted line to sign someone else up for something, knowing there's, let's say, a 2% risk that X outcome could happen, if X outcome does happen, that's on me.
Yeah, because
Even if it's their,
Gamble
even
back.
if they choose
Except
like
it's not
bad
your
things
life
to
you're
get
gambling
into.
with. I think it's totally fine to gamble with your own life like that. Do what you want. But when you start gambling with somebody who's not even born yet, that's tyrannical. You're playing God, in my opinion.
I find it. I
That's
find
like
the conversation fascinating because
I love that we're having this
it's
conversation.
really interesting. I kind of can't believe that you guys believe what you believe because
Oh yeah.
to me. Okay, forgive me. I'm not. This isn't personal. You know that it's not personal.
Yeah.
Super reasonable
it
with this
doesn't-
conversation
it
as
doesn't-
well.
I was
It
going to
does
say,
not-
I'm
not
actually
like
very
shouting
surprised
and
this
going,
has been like
It doesn't philosophically add up.
you don't get a choice whether you're born or not. And I would almost say take away
Because by nature of being unborn, you don't have the faculty of.
Yeah.
no,
And that's the
you don't.
issue.
But I
But
think
that's
it's
arguing with the structure of how.
no.
reality
All right, hang on.
works.
Let me.
It's not disagreeing with reality. It's just saying, given this is the nature of reality, it is therefore unethical to do this thing. Like if you
It's
are going to
ethically
do,
neutral.
I don't think so. Like if you're, well, let's say,
I see what you mean. Actually, no. Actually,
Having
I'll
children is
give you.
ethically neutral
why?
because it's because what you're saying is it's unethical. Something that is inherent to the way that biology and reproduction works is unethical.
Yeah. Why can't that be the case?
Because it's
Wouldn't
just
it
a
just be a-
function. It's just a function of reproduction. It's ethically neutral.
However,
no, that's just
wait, hang on.
to
All right,
nature.
all right, but
Just saying because it's natural, it's okay.
But it's
natural.
But
But-
hang on, one
but-
sec, just let me just break that down a
yeah,
bit more.
yeah.
From my perspective as a
Yeah,
Christian, but I'm not arguing right
Yeah,
now
yeah,
from a
yeah.
Christian perspective. But from my perspective as a Christian, I would argue that it is ethically positive to have children because we're commanded to go
Yeah,
forth and
yeah,
multiply,
yeah, yeah.
right?
If we need to get somewhere, then have enough way to travel.
So that's but that's from that perspective. From a scientific philosophical perspective, I don't know what your philosophical position is. Generally, maybe a utilitarian. I'm not sure, but your position should be it's ethically neutral because biology is neither good nor bad.
all right, okay,
It's not the
wait.
biology of it.
So you cannot. So you're falling into the same.
No, the
Wait, wait,
biology
wait,
of
wait,
it.
wait, hang on, hang on.
Ethically,
I got it.
Is it ethically bad to have children? You're ascribing a moral aspect to something that is basically just.
Because
But rape is biological. We ascribe a moral value to that
also, all right, okay, so
On what basis?
on the fact it causes suffering, violates someone's consent.
If you can't help it, but you want
I'm trying to get it in.
Sorry,
I'm trying
sorry,
to-
you go,
No,
you go.
all right, okay. So I feel like the things that people are missing is the fact that we're going back and forth between biological and moral. Take the biology out of it because science, as you said correctly, is neutral. Biological occurrences are neutral. The Big Bang is fucking neutral. That just happened. It wasn't that it is morally correct to create the universe. It
Yeah.
just happened, or perhaps I don't know what your science theology is if you're a creationist or whatever. But it's the fact that just happened. At the end of the day, you know, God one day decided that the 7 days were going to occur, and that He was going to create the world. I don't know if you are a creationist,
There's no deeper question
But-
than yes and no.
but it's sort of that
Going forwards
basis
or
of
backwards, there's nothing else.
science. Yes, I would agree, is completely neutral.
Yeah.
But
We all chose to live, but we didn't necessarily do anything wrong.
So is suffering neutral?
Yeah, and we said.
no,
that's
wait,
carry
hang on a second.
further.
All right, so
That's
I've
temptation.
got one bit I just want to finish. So choice is what I put as the centerpiece of this ideology, because it is the idea of you make a decision to have a child, but that child does not get the decision to exist. The child does not get the decision and the choice. Well, I'll use the word choice rather than decision to keep it centered.
Yeah.
The child does not get the choice for what suffering it goes through, because I don't know how familiar you are with things like stages of socialization in sociology and psychology and stuff like that. But up until the age of 5, the only influences you really take in are from those immediately around you, i.e. your parents.
Yeah.
And then from 5 to 18 is seen as secondary socialization, which is things like media, your friends, the things you consume, the things you do, the music you listen to, the art you like.
Yeah.
You don't really get much decision in what you are subjected to, because you don't decide where you're born, you don't decide who you're born to, you don't decide when you're born, you don't decide how old your parents are, because generational things create differences.
Yeah.
So you don't get any choice in any of that aspect, which means that you then do not get a choice for what you're subjected to. You don't really get a decision. Life just happens. And I perfectly agree that suffering and trauma can be a catalyst
Yeah.
to make somebody a better person.
Best maintained
But
forwards.
but the point is, and one of the bigger arguments earlier is somebody who's been sexually assaulted, they could go on to do great things.
Yeah.
But if I guarantee you, speaking of somebody who has been sexually assaulted on multiple occasions by multiple different people,
Yeah.
if I could take away that experience, I would do it in a fucking heartbeat, even if that would make me a worse
You know, you
person,
could help.
because I am
You would.
so hurt
Yeah.
by all of it. I love the fact that things like that have made me understanding of people,
Yeah.
and that I am kind to people. But the point is, I would rather have just not gone through that. I would rather not be this person.
But then saying that we should eradicate sexual assault or rape or unnecessary forms of suffering is different to saying that we should eradicate existence.
Right, okay. There is also the fact that looking at eradicating, because this is also a thing that people very commonly confuse. We had some guy earlier, it's like, so you want to kill babies? Like, no one wants to kill anybody, right? Like that's not what this is. And I think it's also the thing of, it's the acknowledgement that I would love to eradicate sexual assault, rape, murder, abuse, all of those things. But the problem is, it doesn't matter how much work you do to do that, it will never happen. Because some of those things are built into human nature. Some animals by nature rape. Have you seen ducks? Ducks are fucking evil.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, no, it is. But it is that whole thing of, we as human beings have much more of a real understanding of what those things mean. We have much more complex emotions and feelings that result in immense pain because of these things. All of that suffering that a lot of people end up going through have perpetuated a lot of different painful cycles.
Yeah.
It turns, because some people may end up better, but then you'll get people who have been pained by certain things who become radical dictators and start killing people.
Yeah.
You get fascists. You get people like Pol Pot, you know, and that breed of individual that imposes themselves on other people like that so much and causes so much suffering themselves.